Every April, the Masters looks like it was handed down from heaven. Perfect fairways, blooming azaleas, a silence so total you can hear the ball land on the green. Announcers talk about it like sacred ground, like it's always been exactly this way. Here's what almost nobody talks about. That ground was already a failure once before Augusta National ever showed up. A bankrupt golf resort. Buried concrete footings nobody ever dug back up. A dead plant nursery that sat rotting in the Georgia heat for a decade before anyone touched it again. And when it finally did get built, it wasn't built by a corporation or a wealthy syndicate with deep pockets and a 5-year plan. It was built by two men, one broke golf legend and one stubborn banker, in the middle of the single worst economic collapse in American history. They had almost no money. Their architect nearly went bankrupt working for them. Their own membership drive basically failed. For years, the whole project teetered on the edge of collapse, and almost nobody outside a small circle of Depression-era golf obsessives thought it would survive. It survived. And it didn't just survive, it became the most recognizable, most tightly controlled, most valuable piece of golf real estate on the planet. In this video, we're breaking down how Augusta National actually got built, the bankrupt land it sits on, the architect who nearly went broke designing it, the membership drive that basically failed, the tournament that saved the whole thing, and how a Depression-era nursery, buried under someone else's ruin, turned into the most famous golf course in the world. Let's get into it. Start with the man behind it. In 1930, Bobby Jones did something no golfer had ever done. He won all 4 major championships in a single year, the Grand Slam. Nobody had done it before. Nobody's done it since. He was 28 years old, at the absolute peak of the sport, and he never made a dime doing it. Jones was an amateur his entire career. He had a law degree, not a paycheck. Then he retired. Completely. He walked away from competitive golf at 28 and wanted exactly one thing next. A private winter retreat somewhere in the South, away from crowds, away from pressure, somewhere he could play golf with friends on his own terms. For that, he needed land and money. Jones understood swings. He did not understand financing. So he brought in Clifford Roberts, a blunt, controlling New York investment banker whose entire skill set was extracting money from wealthy people, even in a country where banks were collapsing by the week. Roberts was not a warm figure. He was famous later in life for running Augusta National with total control, the kind of man who could end a friendship over a scheduling disagreement. But in 1931, that's exactly what the project needed. Somebody obsessive enough to chase donors through the worst years of the Depression, when nobody with real money wanted to sink it into a golf course in rural Georgia. The two of them spent months searching for land before they ever found Augusta. They looked at other sites first. Nothing clicked. It took a mutual friend, a man named Thomas Barrett Jr., to actually point them toward the property that would become Augusta National. The land they eventually found had already buried one failed dream. In the 1850s, a Belgian family named Berkmans bought roughly 365 acres outside Augusta, Georgia, and turned it into Fruitland Nurseries, one of the most important plant nurseries in the American South, importing exotic trees and flowering shrubs from around the world. When the family's horticulturist died in 1910, the nursery went quiet for decades. Then, in the mid-1920s, a developer tried to build a golf resort and a $2 million luxury hotel on that same ground. He got as far as pouring the concrete footings. Then, he went bankrupt. Those footings are still buried under the golf course today. Augusta National is literally built on top of somebody else's ruin. For nearly a decade after that, the property just sat there. Overgrown drive. 2 small stone pillars marking an entrance nobody used anymore. By the time Jones and Roberts came looking, Fruitland had been quiet for the better part of 10 years. A forgotten piece of Georgia land with a dead nursery and somebody else's buried failure underneath it. By 1931, Jones, Roberts, and a small group of investors bought the abandoned property for $70,000. That price only existed because the Depression had scared off every other buyer on Earth. Jones drove up the old magnolia-lined approach to the plantation house and knew instantly, rolling elevation already built in, mature trees already in place, natural drainage the land had been doing on its own for 80 years. He said it felt like the ground had been waiting the whole time for someone to lay a golf course on it. That old plantation house never got torn down. It's still the clubhouse today. For the design, Jones wanted exactly one man, Alistair Mackenzie, a Scottish physician turned golf course architect, the mind behind Cypress Point and Royal Melbourne, arguably the best course designer alive. Jones and Mackenzie shared a philosophy that broke every rule of 1920s course design. Most courses back then were built to punish. Deep bunkers everywhere, narrow fairways, misery for anyone who missed a shot by an inch. Jones and Mackenzie wanted the opposite, wide fairways, minimal rough, greens that could be attacked from multiple angles depending on where the flag was that day. Move the pin 6 feet and the entire hole plays like a different hole. That single idea is why the best golfers alive still get baffled at Augusta every April. It is not the longest course they play all year. It is not the most heavily bunkered. It is the most deceptive. Even the hole names are part of the same DNA. Azalea, Magnolia, Camellia, Firethorn. Those aren't marketing names invented later. The Berkman's family's own descendant helped design the planting when the course was built, and the signature shrub on each hole became that hole's name. The golf course grew directly out of the nursery buried underneath it. Mackenzie almost didn't get the job at all. The connection ran through Marion Hollins, a U.S. women's amateur champion who'd already worked with Mackenzie on Cypress Point in California. She's the one generally credited with putting Jones and Mackenzie in the same room. Jones toured Cypress Point, fell in love with what Mackenzie could do with dramatic natural terrain, and that was it. There was no other candidate. Construction started in February 1932. Mackenzie was assisted on site by Hollins herself, and the two of them worked the land using the natural elevation the old nursery already had, rather than bulldozing it flat and rebuilding from scratch. That's part of why the course still plays across serious elevation change today, even though television cameras flatten it out and make it look almost level. Now, here's the part that gets left out of the highlight reel. Construction wrapped by the end of 1932, on budget, roughly $100,000. On budget did not mean funded, because almost nobody was joining. Roberts had big plans: a second course for women members, tennis courts, squash courts, an entire residential subdivision of member homes, complete with numbered lots and access roads, designed by the Olmsted Brothers landscape firm, the same firm behind some of the most famous parks in America. Almost none of it happened. There wasn't money for any of it. 20 subdivision lots were planned. Only 3 ever sold, all to a single member, who built one large mansion on the property. Decades later, the club bought that parcel back and tore the house down. The grand real estate vision behind Augusta National basically died in its first few years, quietly, without anyone announcing it. Roberts mailed out thousands of invitation letters, some with a personal note from Jones attached, hoping his name alone would sell memberships. After the club's first full year, they had 66 members. That's it, 66. Even Mackenzie, the man who designed the entire golf course, got squeezed by the same money problem. He cut his own fee nearly in half just to keep construction moving. Months after the course opened, he'd been paid only a small fraction of what he was actually owed, not even enough to cover his own expenses. At one point, he wired the club begging for a few $100s just to stay afloat. He died in January 1934, months after the club's first tournament, having never once seen the finished course in full bloom. The grand opening, January 1933, was supposed to be the moment everything turned around. Roberts arranged a private train car to bring a group of wealthy New Yorkers down to Augusta for a celebratory weekend of golf with Jones. It rained the entire weekend. Miserable weather. Barely playable golf. Out of that entire group of guests, exactly one person joined the club afterward. Think about that. The club that would eventually become the hardest ticket in American sports had, at its actual founding, 66 members and a rainout that convinced almost nobody to sign up. The fix wasn't the golf course. It was a tournament created almost as a marketing move to keep the struggling club relevant. In 1934, the club held its first invitational, bringing top players of the era to Augusta, with Jones himself coming out of retirement to play in front of his own membership. It wasn't officially called the Masters yet. Jones thought that name sounded too grand for his own taste and resisted it for years, until Roberts eventually got his way. Even with the tournament running, money stayed thin. Fewer than 80 members total by the time that first event happened. Then World War II shut the whole operation down from 1943 to 1945, and the fairways of Augusta National spent those years as literal pasture, with the club raising cattle and turkeys on the grounds to offset costs and support the war effort. The real turning point came after the war. Radio, then television, carried the course into American living rooms. CBS started broadcasting the Masters in 1956, a relationship that's now run nearly 7 consecutive decades. Ben Hogan's record-setting win in 1953 raised the tournament's competitive weight. Decades of iconic finishes, Jack Nicklaus's 6 green jackets, Tiger Woods' dominant rout in 1997, turned a financially shaky private retreat into arguably the single most recognizable golf course on the planet, and the course never froze in time. In 1937, holes 1 and 10 were actually swapped to improve the flow of play, a change credited to architect Perry Maxwell, who also reshaped the 7th green. In the decades after that, Robert Trent Jones Sr., no relation to Bobby, came in and fortified the course further, narrowing fairways and adding new bunkers as equipment and player distances kept improving. Later architects, including input from Jack Nicklaus himself, kept the changes coming. Every generation has left a mark on the same 18 holes, always chasing the same original idea Mackenzie and Jones started with in 1931, a course that wins with strategy, not distance. The membership itself changed too, slowly and only under real pressure. The club didn't admit its first black member until 1990, and didn't extend membership to women until 2012, when Condoleezza Rice and Darla Moore finally broke that barrier. None of that happened quickly, and none of it happened without outside pressure forcing the issue. The same club that started with 66 members and a rainout eventually became wealthy and powerful enough to control nearly every detail of how the world sees it, and for a long time, that control extended to exactly who was allowed to be a member at all. So the next time a golfer stands over a putt on the 12th green, azaleas blooming behind him, announcers whispering like it's church, remember what's actually under his feet. A bankrupt developer's buried concrete, a dead Belgian family nursery, a retired golfer's stubborn vision, financed on a shoestring in the worst economic collapse in American history, so broke in its early years that its own course architect had to beg the club for money just to eat. There is no other major sporting venue on earth with an origin story quite like this one. A club built from a failure on top of another failure that somehow turned into the most valuable piece of real estate in professional golf. Augusta National wasn't handed its legend. It clawed one out of nothing. If you enjoyed this one, subscribe to Sports Digest. We dig up the hidden history behind the biggest names, places, and institutions in sports.